Chapter 32, Chicken and Blackberry Kisses. Gramps barreled through Wyoming like a house afire. We snaked through winding roads where the trees leaned close, rustling, rush, 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 rush. The road curved alongside river that rolled and gabbled, hurry, hurry, hurry. It was late when we arrived at Yellowstone. All we got to see that evening was a hot spring. We walked on boardwalks, placed across the bubbling mud. Huzza huzza, Graham said, and we stayed at the Old Faithful Inn in a frontier cabin. I'd never seen Gramp so excited. She could not wait for the next morning. We're going to see Old Faithful, she said, over and over. It won't take too very long, will it? I said, and I felt like a mule saying it because Graham was so looking forward to it. Don't you worry, Salamanca, Graham said. We'll just watch the old geyser blow and then we'll hit the road. I prayed all night long to the elm tree outside. I prayed that we would not get in an accident, that we would get to Lewiston, Idaho in time for my mother's birthday, and that we would bring her home. Later, I would realize that I had prayed for the wrong things. That night, Graham was so excited that she could not sleep. She rambled on about all sorts of things. She said to Graham, "Remember that letter from the Eggman that you found under the mattress?" "Of course I remember. We had a wing-ding of an argument over it. You told me you had no dang idea how it got there. You said the Eggman must have slipped in the bedroom and put it there. Well, I want you to know that I put it there." "I know that," Gramps said. "I'm not a complete noodle." "It's the only love letter anybody ever wrote me," Gramps said. "You never wrote me any love letter. You never told me you wanted one." "To me," Gramps said, "your grandfather nearly killed the Eggman over that letter." "Hell bells," Gramps said. "He wasn't worth killing." "Maybe not, but Gloria was." "Ah, yes," Gramps said, placing his hand on his heart and pretending to swoon. "Gloria." "Cut that out," Gramps said, rolling over on her side. "Tell me about Peavy. Tell me about that story. But don't make it too awfully sad." She folded her hands on her chest. "Tell me what happened with the lunatic." When I saw the picture of the lunatic on Sergeant Beckel's desk, I tore out of the office faster than lightning. I ran past Sergeant Bickel, standing in the parking lot. No sign of Phoebe. I ran all the way to her house. As I passed Mrs. Cadaver's house, Mrs. Partridge called to me from her porch. "You're all dressed up," I said. "Going somewhere?" "Oh, yes," she said. "I'm readable." She tottered down the steps, swinging her cobra cane in front of her. "Are you walking?" I asked. She reached down and touched her legs. "Isn't that what you call it when you move your legs like I'm doing?" "No, I meant, are you walking to wherever you're going?" "Oh, no, it's marched too far for these legs. Jimmy's coming. He'll be here any minute." A car pulled up in front of the house. "There he is," she said. She called out to the driver. "I'm readable. I said I would be, and here I am." The driver leaped out of the car. "Sal," he said, "I had no idea you two were neighbors." It was Mr. Berkway. "We're not," I said. "It's Phoebe who is the neighbor." "Is that right?" he said, opening the car door for Mrs. Partridge. "Come on, Mom. Let's get a move on." "Mom?" I said. I looked at Mrs. Partridge. "This is your son?" "Why, of course," Mrs. Partridge said. "This is my little Jimmy." "But he's a Berkway," Mrs. Partridge said. "I was a Berkway once. Then I was a Partridge. I'm still a Partridge." "Then who is Mrs. Cadaver?" I said. "My little Margie," she said. "She was a Berkway too. Now she's a Cadaver." I said to Mr. Berkway, "Mrs. Cadaver is your sister?" "We're twins," Mr. Berkway said. When they had driven away, I knocked at Phoebe's door, but there was no answer. At home, I dialed Phoebe's phone number over and over. No answer. The next day at school, I was relieved to see Phoebe. "Where were you?" I said. "I have something to tell you." She turned away. "I don't want to talk about it," she said. "I do not wish to discuss it." I couldn't figure out what was the matter with her. It was a terrible day. We had tests in math and science. At lunch, Phoebe ignored me. Then came English. Mr. Berkway skipped into the room. People were gnawing on their fingers and tapping their feet and wriggling around and generally getting ulcers, wondering if Mr. Berkway was going to read from their journals. I stared at him. He and Margaret Cadaver were twins? Was that possible? The most disappointing part of that piece of knowledge was that he was not going to fall in love with Mrs. Cadaver and marry her and take her away. Mr. Berkway opened a cupboard, pulled out this journal, slipped the yellow paper over the cover and the cover of one and read, "This is what I like about Jane. She is smart, but doesn't act like she knows everything. She is cute. She smells good. She is cute. She makes me laugh. She is cute." I got a prickly feeling up and down my arm. I wondered if Ben had written this about me. But then I realized that Ben didn't even know me when he wrote his journal. A little buzz was going around the room as people shifted in their seats. Christy was smiling. Megan was smiling. Beth Ann was smiling. Mary Lou was smiling. Every girl in the room was smiling. Each girl thought that this had been written about her. I looked carefully at each of the boys. Alex was gazing nonchalantly at Mr. Berkway. Then I saw Ben. He was sitting with his hands over his ears, staring down at his desk. The prickly feeling traveled all the way up to my neck and then went skipping down my spine. He did write that, but he did not write it about me. Mr. Berkway exclaimed, "Ah, love, ah, life." Sighing, he pulled out another journal and read, "Jane doesn't know the first thing about boys. She once asked me what kisses taste like. So you could tell she hadn't ever kissed anyone. I told her that they taste like chicken, and she believed me. She is so dumb sometimes." Mary Lou Finney jumped out of the chair. "You cabbage head," she said to Beth Ann. "You beef brain." Beth Ann wound a strand of hair around her finger. Mary Lou said, "I did not believe you, and I do know what they taste like, and it isn't chicken." Ben drew a cartoon of two stick figures kissing. In the air over their heads was a cartoon bubble with a chicken saying, "Bok, bok, bok." Mr. Berkway turned a few pages in the same journal and read, "I hate doing this. I hate to write. I hate to read. I hate journals. I especially hate English where teachers only talk about idiot symbols. I hate that idiot poem about the snowy wood. And I hate it when people say the wood symbolized death or beauty or sex or any old thing you want. I hate that. Maybe the woods are just woods." Beth Ann stood up. "Mr. Berkway," she said, "I do hate school. I do hate books. I do hate English. I do hate symbols. And I most especially hate these idiot journals." There was a hush in the room. Mr. Berkway stared at Beth Ann for a minute, and in that minute, I was reminded of Mr. Cadaver. For that brief time, his eyes looked just like hers. I was afraid he was going to strangle Beth Ann, but then he smiled and his eyes became friendly, enormous cow eye once again. I think he hypnotized her because Beth Ann sat down slowly. Mr. Berkway said, Beth Ann, I know exactly how you feel. Exactly. I love this passage. You do?" she said. "It's so honest. I had to admit, you couldn't get more honest than Beth Ann telling her English teacher that she hates symbols and English and idiot journals." Mr. Berkway said, "I used to feel exactly like this. I could not understand what all the fuss was about symbols." He rummaged around in his desk. "I wanted to show you something." He was pulling paper out and flinging them around. Finally, he held up a picture. "Ah, here it is. Dynamite. What is this?" he asked Ben. Ben said, "It's a vase, obviously." Mr. Berkway held the drawing in front of Beth Ann, who looked as if she might cry. Mr. Berkway said, "Beth Ann, what do you see?" A little tear dropped down her cheek. "It's okay, Beth Ann. What do you see?" "I don't see any idiot vase," she said. "I see two people. They're looking at each other." "Right," Mr. Berkway said. "Bravo." "I'm right? Bravo?" Ben said, Huh? Two people? I was thinking the same thing myself. What two people? Mr. Berkway said to Ben. And you were right too. Bravo. He asked everyone else, how many see a vase? About half of the class raised their hands. And how many see two faces? The rest of the class raised their hands. Then Mr. Berkway pointed out how you could see both. If you look only at the white part in the center, you could clearly see the vase. If you look only at the dark parts on the side, you could see two profiles. The curvy side of the vase becomes the outline of two heads facing each other. Mr. Berkway said that the drawing was a bit like symbols. Maybe the artist only intended to draw a vase, and maybe some people look at this picture and see only that vase. That is fine. But if some people look at it and see faces, what is wrong with that? It is faces to the person who is looking at it. And what is even more magnificent, you might see both. Beth Ann said. Two for your money? Isn't it interesting? Mr. Berkway said. To find both? Isn't it interesting to discover that snowy woods could be death and beauty, and even, I suppose, sex? Wow, literature. Did he say sex? Ben said, copying the drawing. I thought Mr. Berkway was finished with the journals for the day, but he made a great show of closing his eyes and pulling something from near the bottom of the stack. She popped the blackberries in her mouth. Then she looked all around. It was mine. I could hardly bear it. She took 2 steps up the maple tree and threw her arm around it and kissed it. People were giggling. I thought I could detect a small dark stain as far as from a blackberry kiss. Ben looked at me from across the room. After Mr. Berkway read about my mother's blackberry kiss, he read about how I kissed a tree and how I have kissed all different kinds of trees since then, and how each tree has a special taste all its own. And mixed in with that taste is the taste of blackberries. By now, because both Ben and Phoebe were staring at me, everyone else stared too. She kisses trees, Megan said. I might have died right then and there. If Mr. Berkway had not immediately picked up another journal, he stabbed his finger into the middle of the page and read, I am very concerned about Mrs. Mr. Berkway stared down at the page. It looked as if he couldn't read the handwriting. He started again. I'm very concerned about Mrs. Corpse. Her suspicious behavior suggests that she has murdered her own husband. Phoebe's eyes blinked rapidly. Go on, Ben said. Finish. You could tell that Mr. Berkway was regretting that he had ever started this business with the journals, but all around the room people were shouting, Yes, finish. And so he reluctantly continued. I believe she has buried him in her backyard. When the bell rang, people went berserk. Wow, a murder? Who wrote that? And is it real? I was out of that room faster than anything, chasing after Phoebe. Megan called out after me. You kiss trees? I tore out of the building. No, Phoebe. Idiot journals, I thought. Gold darn idiot journals.